In today's episode, I talked to Matthew Phili, and what a great guy and what a great conversation. And what it boils down to that I want you to listen throughout the episode and really pay close attention is when we talk about the importance of drive, curiosity, and fascination. These things are critical as you're going towards greatness. The other thing that really jumped out, again, that I want to highlight here and then have you guys listen towards the end of the episode, we talk about the importance of doing the work in the difficult areas. And a phrase that jumped out to me that really had a lot of impact from what Matthew said was, you don't know where to start if you don't know where it hurts. So think of that. Think about your pathway to greatness. Enjoy this episode. I know you will. I did. Thanks, Matthew. It's not about the talent you have, but the mindset you bring to it. Kobe Bryant. Kobe Bryant, hands down, has to be considered one of the most elite athletes to ever walk the earth. Why? Was it his athletic ability? Possibly. But for me, it was the mindset and the willingness to prepare better than anyone else is truly what made him elite. Today, our student athletes are facing challenges that haven't ever been seen before. So much social media, actively having to market themselves, the transfer portal, NIL, it goes on, and not to mention, they have to keep their grades up. Winging it and just seeing what happens is not the strategy needed, but it's what most athletes, coaches, and parents are using. You have to be intentional. You have to invest in skills that scale with life. With this highly competitive environment, how do student athletes separate themselves from the crowd? Be elite. Apart from having athletic statistics and grades, what does this mean? Well, let me introduce you to the Elite Edge 90-Day Program. The Elite Edge 90-Day Program is designed to assist the student athlete to develop the mental performance to have the self-discipline, self-awareness, and focus necessary to navigate internal and external challenges. The program will also assist in developing a real specific plan that will help them achieve their own individual goals. Each athlete will also be able to communicate their mission, vision, and values that make them unique. Imagine how this will be received when they are looking to differentiate themselves during the recruiting process. What will be learned in these 90 days can be used for the rest of their lives. This is scalable. I'm offering the Elite Edge program live or virtual, and one-on-one, group, or team options are available. So reach out today to learn more about the Elite Edge 90-Day program and Highlight Coaching and Consulting.
Yeah, you can always cut out whatever you want, I guess. Eh?
I could, or we could just go, because for me, I just want people to see everything, because I feel like nowadays it's so easy to produce things. Everything's overproduced, and we cut out the flaws and the imperfections to make it perfect. And people that know me, as I am far from perfect, and I'm perfectly okay letting the pimples and all the other things hang out versus covering them up.
Yeah, well, I think anyone who claims to be anywhere near perfect is just lying or doesn't know themselves all that well, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think it's between that and then there's an insecurity, because I know coming from me, I can speak as an expert there, is that you feel that perfection is what other people expect. And so you want to please people so much that you want to have everything perfect. You want to have this, there, and that, and the perfect background and all these different things. When I had a mentor one time tell me, like, you're not that important and people don't care that much. I went, wait a minute, that's not fair.
Yeah, no, interesting. That's an interesting thought for sure. And well, my opinion, it all comes down to standards too, right? Like, what standard do you hold yourself to, and what are you willing to put out there before, like, what level are you willing to attain and push to before you start putting things out there into the world? So we strive for perfection, or at least we strive for the best quality we possibly can, right? And your standards basically hold that threshold, that barrier. And I'm a big fan of not waiting for perfection and trying to ditch perfection so that we can just put something out there and then improve and perfect and work on perfecting along the way. But I'm also a stickler for having very high standards in the things that we do. So that's also a constant battle, a constant struggle between this isn't ready yet. This doesn't feel like I would be content putting this out there. And this stuff needs to just be out there and helping the people. And then ultimately we can make the improvements and progressions along the way as needed. And to me, that's like a big constant internal battle that I struggle with.
Oh, and it's 100%. And I think it's not just you, it's everybody. And the more people that I listen to and podcasts that I hear is they're like, just get it. And we hate to hear the word good enough, but since you have high standards, your good enough is someone else's excellence. And I feel there's so many times that we're not willing to accept the high standards that we have as being someone else's excellence because we're humble and we don't think that what we're putting out is great. And somebody else watches it and like, holy smokes, dude, that's awesome. And you're like, but look at what I did. I stumbled on that word, or I didn't have my movement completely the way I wanted it to look. And people are like, I don't care. I got a lot of value from it.
Right. We are our biggest critics too, right? For the most part. I mean, I think anyone who really does have high standards and anyone who really does care about excellence in a way and greatness is their biggest critic. And I think that can be almost like a superpower in continuously striving for better and bigger things. It's like, I don't know if you're familiar with the two concepts of imposter syndrome, and then on the opposite side of the spectrum being like the armchair quarterback. Is that what they call it?
It is, yeah.
So the armchair quarterback being the guy that basically has extremely high levels of confidence and feels like they can do everything better than anybody else. And then the imposter syndrome feels like they're nowhere near good enough to be doing what they're doing or being held as an expert or whatever the case is. And I feel like being closer to that imposter syndrome is genuinely where the bubble of greatness kind of lies. And the reason I believe that is because I think that is like a constant push towards trying to improve yourself. There's always a feeling, like, I'm not talking about complete insecurity and complete just a feeling of not being good enough whatsoever, but that little itch at the back of your mind that's basically telling you like this, you're not quite as great as you need to be yet. That little itch that's constantly pushing you to do a little bit more and go a little bit further and step that extra 2 inches, that extra mile, however you want to use that term. And I think that's super powerful. And early on in my business, especially, I found that was something that I really struggled with. And in the beginning, I let it cripple me. And over the last year and a half, that's actually been something that I've been more aware of and instead used it as fuel, which has been a huge shift in just the way I see myself and the way that I lead my team as well as my business and my efforts towards growing the business. So I love the concepts of just like human psychology and all these various different ways that we can be acting and how we think about ourselves and how they push us towards our ideal self. Super interesting to me.
See, this is why you were one of the first people that I reached out to have on the podcast, because I knew that you would bring constant and not just constant, but just nuggets of absolute wisdom, and you've got a good vision and you're grounded. So before we continue on, those that are listening, I know I'll have an intro, but this is Matthew Phili, and we met, I can't remember exactly how we crossed paths on
It's been a while.
Instagram, but you were one of the early ones that I came across, and we built a back and forth relationship, really a little bit before COVID and then through COVID, because I did one of your hip mobility challenges, which was awesome. And then it was not the hip. Yeah, it was hip mobility, but it was the low squat. I can't remember what you called it. But that was fun. And then I was on your podcast that you had, and it was a great opportunity. So you're a husband, a father, a business owner of Primal Mobility. And one thing that I did love is you're a movement nerd.
Oh my God. Yeah, that's to say the least. I would say at this point, it's an obsession. Like I'm very, very, as I was talking about, like I'm very fascinated and just curious about like human psychology and our behaviors and what drives us to do certain things. But biomechanics and movement in general is a true fascination, like a deep curiosity and obsession at this point, which again, it's fueling me towards the stuff that we need to create for the company. But yeah, these are the types of things that seem to drive my content anyways, and drive my actions.
Yeah.
I'm constantly looking for new ways to find information about how people move and why we act certain ways and the certain things we do. So people are interesting, man.
They are. So before we get into all that, I like to have a little fun because I want people to get to know you a little bit more. So I like to play Would You Rather. Have you ever played that?
Yeah, probably as a drinking game, but
Well, this one's clean. This one's good. So the first one, would you rather freeze time or go back in time?
that's a good question. I feel like the majority of my thoughts go towards going back in time.
Okay.
I don't know if you want information or if we're doing like a,
Yeah, I'd love
you
to
know,
find out why. Yeah.
okay. Well, I mean, in this very moment, with what we were talking about before being parents, I want to say I'd prefer to freeze time just to be in this moment with the kids for a longer period of time. But I'm constantly fascinated by the thought of moving back in time. And every time I do, I keep thinking about what I would change and how I would improve myself faster and when I would start my business and what I would do when I started my business. So it's kind of like, the hindsight is always 2020 kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's probably why it is. I would frequently think like, what if I could go back 15 years and still have the same knowledge that I have now? And I would be like, I would start Primal immediately and I would just take it to the moon within a year. And that's always like a really exciting thought, right? Like, where would we be now if I started Primal Mobility 15 years ago and stuff like that? And just who would I be at this point if I started like my journey on or to personal development 15 years ago instead of 4 years ago? It's an interesting thought.
It is. So Hank, I'm going to put a pin there. I've got a buddy that laughed because he was in a meeting and they're like, let's right click on that for a second. We're not going to right click on it. But we'll come back to that because I have some thoughts around that, but I don't want to get off track. So the next one is, would you rather live without music or TV?
TV.
Okay. What kind of music are you into?
I like all sorts of music. I really like classic rock. That's kind of like like I would say like between the 60s and 70s decades. I'm really interested in the history of the music culture back then. And I just love the music that came from that time, that era. But then I also love hip hop, all sorts of different types of hip hop. And I like blues. I like jazz. I just like guitar a lot. I like the piano. Those types of things just kind of like grab my ear.
Who are some of the artists in the 60s and the 70s?
I really love Led Zeppelin. The Beatles were huge, obviously, and just an interesting. It's interesting to see kind of like what they created out of their early years of music and how music developed after them. Who else? Just a lot of the classic rock guys for sure. Like I like Boston. I like Foreigner. I like Elton John was great. I have a whole bunch of records downstairs, like CCR. Tom Petty was huge. Really, really appreciated his music. Those kind of guys, you know?
All right, well, I'm surprised you didn't mention Rush.
Right, yeah, because I'm Canadian. Yeah, I never really got into Rush all that much, but I do love, outside of those decades, those eras, is Tragically Hip.
I don't know them.
You don't know the Tragically Hip? Oh my God. Yeah, they're a big Canadian band. They're out of Kingston. Check them out though. They are wicked. The lead singer, Gord Downey, actually died in, I don't know, a few years back from brain cancer. And it was this huge thing. Like they hosted their last concert in the hometown, so in Kingston. And it was like people were lined up around the blocks and they put up this big jumbotron or this giant television screen thing, and people were all crying and stuff. It was this massive event, and their music's great. I think you'd love it. You should check it out.
I'll check it out. And listeners need to Google that as well. Write it down. Tragically Hip. Okay.
Tragically Hip, yeah.
Would you rather work out legs or arms?
Legs. I have tiny arms. I've always preferred to train legs just because I guess I had a complex. I was always a small kid in high school, and one of the things that I recognized as a symbol of true strength was like a big lower body, strong legs, strong hips. And that's like, I kind of just dove right into training legs early on and neglected my arms. So now I'm back to training arms, trying to get them to catch up a little.
That's rare for a dude to say he'd rather work out legs than arms or chest, because it's like everybody has chest
Right.
day and arm day, and they're like, oh, I'll do legs every now and again.
Yeah, that's true. And there's a lot of in the line of work that I'm in, we deal, like Primal Mobility, we deal with a lot of like people who are struggling with injuries and pain and whatever else. And a lot of that comes from weakness in the hips, weakness in the ankles and the knee areas. And so again, that may have kind of fueled the interest towards that as well. But I feel like there's more of a need towards that than training your biceps and triceps.
Yeah,
they're bigger muscles, and they're important for daily function.
Yeah. Yep. No doubt. We're going to get to that again, because I want to dig into that more. So the last one, would you rather have pizza or tacos?
Oh, man, the tacos I make are not very good. So probably
tacos.
because the tacos we make are just like, it's too easy. It's just like ground beef, salsa, and then like a taco shell. There's no like extra stuff to it. But I've had tacos at the restaurants, and those tacos are next level delicious. Like they have like mango in it, and cherry tomatoes and jalapeno and fish or chicken or all this delicious stuff. And so I'd probably be down for that over pizza, but not my tacos, that's for sure. Not the tacos I make.
All right, so you go with pizza?
Yeah, it's probably a safer choice.
Okay.
Pizza's a better choice.
Do you have favorite toppings on the pizza?
I just go classic cheese or a margarita pizza, like cheese and basil.
Yep.
Yeah, fresh, so good. Especially if you make it like a sourdough pizza with some nice like hard mozzarella and then just some fresh basil on it. Oh man. Yeah. I think I may be having some pizza pretty soon.
I can see it in your eyes. For those that are just listening, actually everybody's going to listen. I don't think I'm going to do video yet, but his eyes just had a little, I think I saw a little a light flash in your eye when you were thinking about that pizza.
Oh my God. I don't know if you've ever had sourdough crust, but it's unreal if you cook it properly. It's almost like those wood oven pizzas that you get, where it's like the crust has like a bubble in it and it pops and it's crispy, and it's so good.
Yeah. I love gluten.
Me too. I really do.
Okay, so let's get back to you dropped a lot of great information beforehand. And the one particular thing that I wanted to go back to is when you said go back in time. To be able to go back in time and help yourself, as long as you knew what you know now, to be able to go back in time. And as we talked about beforehand, the pathways to greatness, of how it's not a linear path and there's twists and turns. And it's also important to look back at where you came from. So help everybody understand some of the struggles that, because if you look at your Instagram now and you see what the success that you've had, you would think, well, Matthew's always been successful. Look at what he's got. So take people back to where you first started and some of those critical lessons of fail that came from failure that would help someone.
Well, I should probably preface this by explaining that there's no part of my story that lacks privilege. I've definitely always been a very privileged person, and that comes back from what we had when I was growing up. There was no lack of resources for me in terms of basically anything except for connections. I was not a very well connected person, but when it came down to having the support from my family to help me get off my feet in terms of getting educated, I had that. When it came down to the support from those around me in terms of being able to step away from work earlier than most people would, I had that. So I had some fallback plans in terms of, not plans, but I should say I had some fallback support if I ever really truly needed it. That being said, I wanted to do everything in my power to avoid having anyone support me at that type of level, and I did, thankfully. But I just want everyone to know that I'm not coming from a place of like complete lack of anything, really. So where it all started for me was basically, I would say early on, coming out of high school, there was really not much. I was not in the fitness industry at the time. I was familiar with the gym. I was relatively athletic. However, I was very heavily involved in partying, drugs, and alcohol. And that seemed to be the majority of my priorities, where I would just focus on finding the next party, finding the next drink, finding the next joint, all that stuff. And that seemed to lead the decisions that I would make. So I was in and out of jobs quite frequently, really just kind of like a classic delinquent, no vision, no true goals or aspirations in life. And I was completely content. Like, I was dating my wife at the time. So my wife now, we were just dating at the time. And we kind of grew up together. So we started dating when we were 15, but she was always very good in school and very determined, great work ethic. And at the time, I was just completely content with her getting an amazing job and supporting us pretty much. And that was kind of like my vision was like, okay, well, I don't need to work that hard because she's got some great work ethic. She's intelligent. I'm not a smart person. So I don't need to push myself all that hard. At least that's the story I told myself. And so that kind of led the decisions. And then I started working as a personal trainer and started to realize that I did have curiosities and I did have fascinations, and it kind of helped me develop a little bit more ambition to grow and succeed at something, because this was the first time I wasn't going to be paid a paycheck unless I actually had some kind of performance behind my efforts. And so I started pushing a little bit harder, working longer hours, seeing that, oh, I can learn if I'm interested in something, and I can be intelligent, and I can express my thoughts in a coherent way if I actually care about what I'm talking about. These are all things that I wasn't experiencing early on and through high school and stuff like that. So I started to gain a little bit more confidence around myself and understanding that there is a little bit more behind me and I do have a little bit more drive and ambition. And then my son was born. And as my son was being born, I had the job I was at, my managers switched. So I got a new boss. And I was kind of butting heads with my new boss. My son was just born. And so I started taking courses in college to try and get a desk job, something safe and secure and stable, so that I could support my son and my wife and my life. And so I told that to my boss and said, like, hey, I'm just so you know, I have a kid. I'm trying to get a little bit more stable in my life. And he told me at the time, this was my new boss. He told me at the time, okay, that's fine, but we are basically going to start pushing you out and kicking you out. And that's because I wasn't going to be able to give as much of my time to the gym that I was working at. And so that immediately just gave me a big F you. Like I basically said, all right, I couldn't care less about you guys anymore, considering it's clear that you guys don't care about anything other than your numbers. And so I made the decision at that time to completely just leave. I didn't quit on the spot, but I started putting together a gym in my basement. And then a couple of weeks later, I left and tried to start building a personal training business out of my house. And that was successful initially, where I was in profit probably right away. But then I quickly realized that everything that I brought in was not going to be paid on a monthly basis. It was going to be paid quarterly or, every 6 months. And then I started to realize this is not going to be very comfortable. This is not going to be a comfortable life. So I started at that time, I started having to find ways to get creative and set myself apart and just find ways to bring in more leads and be more lucrative within the business. So I found a certification that was called fascial stretch therapy that was really not well developed, or not well developed. It was not well, it wasn't very popular. That's what I'm trying to go for there. It wasn't very popular at the time. And I saw that as an opportunity to stand out and be kind of one of a kind in my city. And so I took full accreditation in that, all 3 courses in it, and came back and realized I was the only one in my city with this level of certification. So I started pushing that as my thing. And that was the birth of Primal Mobility. It was strictly in person. And then I started trying to find ways to excel at it and really gain notoriety and have the community see who I was and want to work with me. So I started offering my services for free to so many people. So I would go and do events where I would work for 14 plus hours, sometimes without eating because it was so busy. So I would go to CrossFit events, be the first booth to set up and basically the last booth to leave. And all day people are just coming to me while they're performing their events with pain. And I'm just there stretching them out, making them feel good so that they can go back and hit their next event feeling good. And I would do stuff like that where I would basically get professional athletes on my table for free, just for like, please just put me up on your Instagram. That's all I ask. I'll stretch you for free for a month. Just make one post about me, talk about our services. That's it. And so I did that for a little bit. And then one day there was a CFL athlete, that's the Canadian Football League. He reached out to me because he saw that I was working with a few of the local CFL football players. And he said, hey, I see that you're working with a bunch of the guys from Ottawa. Is there any way that you could program mobility for me? And at that time, I had nothing set up. I was working strictly in person. And I told him, yes, I will figure it out. I have no structure in place, but I will do it. I don't care. Like, let's see what we can do. And I got on a phone call with him and tried to explain all that. And basically, he never hired me and kind of ghosted me after that. So I was like, okay, I guess he wasn't ready to be a guinea pig for me. He was a professional athlete, so obviously not. But that opened my eyes to the need for that this is possible to do online. And that's something that really fascinated me and excited me, that I could help people from around the world and not have to leave my house or not have to have strangers come into my house. And, especially when my son was young and just having people in and out all the time. And so that was the real birth of Primal Mobility, I believe. So September 15th of 2018, I shifted completely online. And this is the type of person I am. When I got that idea in my head, I canceled all my clients in person. Killed was a terrible choice of words there. Canceled all my clients.
Business if you're doing that.
Yeah, no kidding. Canceled all my clients in person and just dove right into online coaching and put all my efforts into building my business online. So that immediately freed up a whole bunch of time where I would then have those 14 hours that I was doing at events would now just be towards building up on social media, building relationships with athletes outside of my city and in the demographic that I was trying to go in. And so that's kind of where it all started. And then within all of that, I started finding that if I wasn't working 14 hours a day or 10 or 12 or really grinding on those shifts, that I wasn't going to make the progress that I needed to make early on in order to actually pay my bills, right? So for the first 4 to 6 months of shifting online, I was making $400 per month. And my car payment alone was $650. So I wasn't able to pay my car, wasn't able to pay my mortgage, wasn't able to pay groceries and all this other stuff. And so there was a lot of fire under my ass to get things done. And, I guess I think it's Tony Robbins that often says, if you want to take over the island, you got to burn the boats. And that's kind of the situation I was in, is that I didn't really have a fallback plan. And if I wasn't going to succeed here, I needed to kind of consider going to McDonald's or Walmart.
Right.
So this was a better opportunity for me. It was worth it to sacrifice my time and go headfirst into jumping into this. And along that, I started to realize that there's personal development and business success are not separate. They're very much mutual. And I think that was a big part of where I started getting really passionate about developing my mindset and putting in the effort to actually make progress there instead of solely in the business side of things. So that's kind of like a big backstory, and there's a lot behind it, but
no, and thank you so much for sharing all that, because a lot of that I didn't know. I mean, we've been following each other for a couple of years now, but three words that jumped out at me that I want to make sure that the listeners, if they need to go back and listen, they should go back and listen, because your path is filled with so many things that would have made most people jump off the path and get on the paved sidewalk and try to find something that's easy. Because you talked about going to school to try to find a good, stable office job. The reason behind that, from what I could tell, was a noble reason. You wanted to take care of your wife. You wanted to take care of your newborn son, create a stable environment that allowed them to be safe and secure financially. And that's what that office job would do. But I could also tell at the same time is if you did that, that would have been a slow death that you would have had over the years, because that's not what excited you. So that's the first thing, is that we can make decisions that are safe for noble reasons, but they might not be the right decision. The three words that jumped out that I wrote down, and because then I want you to dive into these again. So one that I got was drive, curiosity, and fascination. And I love those three words because that's what it takes to obtain greatness, regardless of what your definition of greatness is. And then we'll get to that in a second. But talk about those three words: drive, curiosity, and fascination, and what they mean to you.
Well, it's funny that you picked up especially the word drive, because as I was mentioning earlier on in my explanation, is that's not something I ever had. Drive, if you look back at my history, there was very little failure due to very little effort. And I would never have drive in place. So anytime anything would get hard, I would just give up, as opposed to letting it get to the point where I felt like it was going to be a failure. So, and I don't know what had shifted, but when I decided to start my own business, I think that there was a lot of fear of failure in place. I was afraid that it was just going to be another one of those things that my family saw as like, he's just, he'll be off finding the next job in no time. You know what I mean? And I think that was a huge driving factor towards the ambition that I had to succeed. So I was mostly afraid of just being there, like falling into that same envelope, that same window of it's the same pattern, same thing that he always does. And I think that that fear drove me. And I'm so grateful for that, even though I'd never really understood it at the time. I think that that's like, now that we're kind of chatting about it, that's something that was really driving me. So now I have drive for other reasons, but I'm thankful for that early drive where it was like, there was fear behind it. It was mostly fueled by fear. And at the time, it's very uncomfortable, like extremely, extremely uncomfortable. And it's mostly just stress, but it fuels you. And then you get to a point where you're driven through other things. And that's where the creative, or the curiosity at least, comes in. And it's like, oh, well, now I'm curious about the various different things that actually do excel at business, because I saw this type of stuff work. And the only reason I was able to see these things work is because I stuck through those early, really challenging situations and periods of time that were initially fueled by fear. And so the curiosity started to build afterwards, I believe. And I'm a big believer that curiosity and creativity can really only be present in when you have the drive as well as the space. So if you're not fueled by stress and fear, then you'll have more opportunity to be creative as well as curious, because you won't be bogged down by the fog that is fear of certain things, right? And that when we're afraid, that is what kind of consumes us. And it makes it very challenging to try and see things outside of the box and see different perspectives, and which is very important, in my opinion, when it comes to creativity. So I believe, like, if you ask me what these all mean, drive to me is almost synonymous with passion, or at least maybe all of these words kind of work cohesively together. So I don't think passion is something that you inherently have. And I don't think passion is something that you just get as soon as you find the thing. I think passion is something that is built over time, and it first starts off as an interest. So for me, I wasn't initially passionate about fitness in any way. I was interested in, and it was something that caught my attention. And it was something that I started to realize, okay, I'm actually quite good at this. And it's something that I'm actually picking up faster than I've seen other things, or that I've learned other things. And then over time, that had me diving deeper and finding different things, and then starting to see what genuinely interested me in the fitness industry. So for me, that's biomechanics, just movement in general, and like the movement mechanics behind it. And from there, I was able to start developing more passion behind it. So now I'm genuinely fueled by learning more, and then seeing the impact that knowledge that I can gain has on the world. Whereas initially it was just an interest, right? Something that I saw as, this is pretty cool. I can actually get behind this and try to learn a little bit more about it. So I think curiosity and drive especially are two that work very, very closely together. And then creativity comes once you've had those in place, I believe. So once you know where you're trying to go, and you remove kind of barriers in your way, being like fear and mental fog and clutter being like busy work, then you give yourself space to just be and see what direction you can go in and how you can get there in interesting and different types of ways. So
yeah, and I was thinking when you were talking that curiosity creates drive, because it sounded like that you were so interested in learning more, that the more you learned, this goes to your passion discussion, the more you learned, the more interested you got, the more it became a passion, which then drove you to learn more. So it's the more you learn, the more you love it, the more you love it, the more you learn.
Chicken and the egg kind of thing.
It's that cycle that was created. And then on top of that you loved it so much, and somebody was getting ready to take that away from you, which then created the drive of that, I'll show you moment, and I'll go start my own thing. if you're not going to buy into my vision and what I feel like I should be able to do, then oh well, here we go. And it's almost like when we look back in time, for me, is I like to look back to see where we came from. So back to your go back in time statement, it's important to look back, because now how grateful are you for that boss that you butted heads with?
Unreal. It's interesting to look at it that way for sure.
Because without him pushing you and pushing your buttons, which he wasn't doing it on purpose. He wasn't trying, I'm going to get Matt to go ahead and go out there and do more and be more. It was just, that was the way he was. When we look back and you see what that situation was, is that catapulted Primal Mobility, and having that person that came along the pathway that you resented and were aggravated, but in reality created something and created that combustion that was needed, that spark that was needed to be where you're at today. Because if it was comfortable, you'd probably still be a trainer at that gym.
Yeah, or maybe even, who knows, working that desk job, right? So I think it's kind of a combination, like it was almost the perfect storm in a way, because this was his first management position ever. So he was also in a new role and very unfamiliar with how to lead at that point and what the right approach to leading was. And so he's no longer a manager. Like, I'm still, I know the people in that circle still, and I'm still connected with him, and he's no longer a manager. He's actually back to being a trainer. He was a trainer, came to our gym as a manager, went back to his old gym as a trainer because he didn't like being a manager. And, you know, that small window that he was a manager had an impact on my complete future. And it's funny, I with all these different things, I completely believe now that everything does happen for a reason. And when one door closes, another one opens. And sometimes it's easier to say these kinds of things, right. But at least being open to accepting opportunities when they come, even if they look like they're not quite opportunities in the moment. So that takes, I think, experience and just some form of wisdom to be able to be like, this is something that I can see that might lead to something, where in the moment, back then, that was kind of my only option, or that I felt like anyways. I was miserable at the job, and it was like, I would rather just start my own business, and then if it doesn't work out, go find something quick, Walmart or whatever, anywhere, right? And so yeah, it really is fascinating how the things in the moment that we regret, or not necessarily regret, but at least they're painful and uncomfortable, and we see them as big negatives, can truly be something that leads us to where we ultimately always wanted to go, or at least may have never even imagined us going.
Right. And I also like to put myself in that new leader, now that, getting the context that he was a new leader. What kind of development was he getting? What kind of development was he looking for? You said earlier that personal development goes hand in hand with professional development. Is that he just think he was a natural leader and didn't put in the work of, okay, how can I lead this team? How can I communicate? How can I be empathetic while maintaining a high level of expectation and accountability? So, and then whoever put him in that position, what kind of disservice did they do for him by not giving him the guidance and how to teach him how to be and mentor him how to be a good leader? So you look at it, at least I do, I try to start to, instead of pointing fingers, look at the situation, be grateful for where I'm at, and then think of, okay, what was this person's situation that created the poor leadership? Sometimes they're just, people are nasty people. I mean, but I don't know this individual, but some of it probably came from lack of development on his part and the people above him.
For sure. He was actually a very nice person. Like it was just the the leadership approach, and it was a brand new thing. And in the situation, like, you don't know what you don't know, right? And if you're new to something and you've never, as you said, truly had the resources to be able to develop appropriately, it can be extremely challenging to actually understand how to approach situations effectively. So I genuinely like the guy as a person, but when it came to like a working relationship, we couldn't manage, like we weren't compatible basically. And it came down to that final straw where it was like he had basically said, and I think it was actually something that came from above him, that was like, okay, well, we're going to stop. We're basically going to cut your hours, and we're going to be stop giving you leads, and we're going to talk to the front end and make sure they don't give you memberships and stuff like that. And it was like, okay, well, and that's probably what he was told by his boss, which is like a straight up matter of fact situation. It's like, okay, but you don't need to relay that. Like, that's not the most effective way to relay the message to somebody who's clearly going through some kind of a turmoil and challenging decision to make, right? Like this life situation that they're going through. So I think that's where the hiccups were. It was that he was new to leadership. His boss at the time didn't have great communication on how this message that he was relaying to him should be delivered to the person below him. And so, like you said, it's just like, it was like the perfect storm to push me in the direction that I ended up going in.
Yay.
Yeah. Ultimately, it turned out to be the best thing ever.
Yeah. So a good visual as I'm thinking through that is, you have somebody new that comes into your program, and talk people through, because I think they can actually, I know that they could relate to the physical pain that they would go through in trying something new, especially when there's a lack of mobility, a lack of flexibility. So how many of us go into new situations with a lack of flexibility to be able to handle all the new movements that are coming our way? So give people a visual description of how you bring somebody new into the program and how you coach them through those moments of, Matthew, I just can't do it. I can't do it. This hurts too bad. How do you counsel people? Because I know that this will relate to where people are in their lives that might not necessarily be from a physical perspective.
Yeah. And I love where this is going, because I can already see how this can translate over to various different challenges in life too. So when somebody new comes in, let's say they're particularly restricted in their joints. Their joints are very tight. They'd consider themselves to be extremely immobile, very opposite of flexible, right? Tight everything. So let's say that type of person comes in, and in our approach, we focus a lot on building joint strength and feeling strong in your deeper ranges of motion. So what we do essentially is get you into a deep stretch position and then have you put in work there. So it's extremely challenging work. It's strength based. So we're very focused on applying contractions and being very active in the positions that are generally quite uncomfortable. So this can be painful in the beginning. It can be quite uncomfortable. And one of our core principles is to never approach pain, because it is quite counterproductive to the progress of mobility, particularly in mobility. And also it's a liability thing. So what we do is in those situations, we simply just ask them to reduce their range of motion by about 1 inch to 2 inches. So we just make it slightly more bearable in those situations, where in the beginning they were getting into the positions and their body's screaming at them, this is so painful, like I don't want to spend any time in this position, let alone start engaging my muscles and starting to try to be active in this position. It's extremely uncomfortable. What do I do? Okay, so let's reduce your range of motion slightly. So I could use the frog stretch as an example. I'm not sure if that's an extremely common stretch. Do you know what the frog stretch is?
I do.
Okay, so maybe it is very common. I'm not sure. Let's use that as an example. So you're in the frog stretch where your knees are completely spread out to the sides and you're sitting down deep into that frog stretch position. Your groin and adductors are just screaming at you. This is extremely uncomfortable. It feels like my groin's going to rip. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're just going to bring your knees in together 1 inch on each side. How does your adductors feel there? Okay, well, here I feel like I'm getting a good stretch. It's pretty intense, but it's no longer extremely uncomfortable. I feel like I can manage it here. Perfect. That's exactly where you're going to start your work. We're just going to be working there. And over time, you're going to find that you're going to pass that initial point of where you started that felt like it was too intense to bear. You're going to pass that and feel confident and controlled when you do pass it. And so that's like a very simple way that we would just kind of help people ease into the approach that we do, because it can be fairly intense and quite challenging in the beginning, the first couple of weeks for sure. And I like to, especially since you're bringing that up, that's a great way for us to just improve ourselves as well, is look at that same challenge that individual was having with that stretch position, and apply that concept, that perspective to our life challenges. And instead of, let's say a marathon run, let's just say you want to go for a marathon run, however, you're not a runner. It's just something that you want to challenge yourself with. And the thought of that is probably quite grueling. And it's something that seems nearly impossible right now. Well, why would we start at a marathon run? Why is that? That would never be your first run, right? So we scale it back. Your first run is going to be maybe 2-3 kilometers or miles or whatever. So that's definitely how we can approach challenges in real life as well. It's just, okay, reduce the stimulus a little bit, reduce the stress levels a little bit, and bear here and get stronger here. And you'll see that now the outer limits of those ranges, those stressors are now becoming more bearable again. So what used to be completely unbearable is now entering the bubble of what is tolerable now. And now you can start pushing towards it. And that's how you grow, I think. That's how you become more resilient and develop grit, is to constantly be pushing past your comfort zone, but not so far that you cripple yourself.
Right.
And I think we call that a stretch goal, where it's a goal that's outside your current limits and you're not quite sure if you can manage it. And it's going to force you to step outside your comfort zone. And it's going to force you to do a little bit more than you're currently capable of. But it's something that fuels you and gives you a little bit of excitement to even think of. So for some people, that might be a marathon. For someone, that might be a 5-kilometer run, right? For some people, that might just be their first run. Everyone has their different hard, right? And I think that's a really great comparison to the way we get somebody to hop into our programs and do it comfortably and sustainably and progressively. And then also that same carryover to how we can address lifestyle challenges and stressors.
Definitely. I wrote down, do the work in difficult areas. And then I also put that resonated with me is you don't know where to start if you don't know where it hurts. And so you have to go, you need somebody like you, an outside force, to be able to say, look, I know you can go more. Because how many times do we sit in our own living room in a frog position, trying to touch our toes? As soon as we get just a little bit of resistance, you're like, whoo, that's as far as I can go. I'm done. But if you have somebody that knows how to motivate, how to educate, to keep you safe, but to push you past that limit that you have self-imposed on yourself, that you tell yourself in your head, is like, no, if you warm up this way, I can almost guarantee within 10 minutes, I can have you touching your toes. And they're like, no, like I guarantee it could just be a hip shift. You just, there's a lot of different things. And as I sat there and you were talking, we have to be uncomfortable, but you said this earlier, but it's scary. It's something that we don't like to do. So build the curiosity to go to that place that's uncomfortable. And I know you're in that place. And as I look back through my life, I was nurtured to stay away from discomfort. It was not something that I was encouraged to do. I also think as parents, many times we fail because we ask our kids to stop asking questions. And in school, they're asked to stop asking questions, just hear what I'm telling you, and you'll be fine on the test. When in life, we have to be curious. And if we start to nurture and breed and teach curiosity out of our kids, then we're not creating a whole nother generation of people that are curious to go, you know what, I want to find out about that. I mean, it's what's made our world great. It's what's created all these wonderful things. If we all just stayed safe, we wouldn't have cures to all these different diseases. We wouldn't have iPhones. We wouldn't have Zoom that we're on. All these things that people were just like, I know there's a better way. And that's what I want people to hear of what you said, is that there's a better way, and you can create your own way because you used all the resources that were around you. You maintained your high level of curiosity, and then you found a niche. That's the other thing, is if you're looking for something and you're looking to do a business, I love what you said, is you looked all around like nobody has this. Like nobody has this certification. If they do, they're not talking about it. I need to talk about it. The other thing I want you to dive in, because I'm very respectful of your time, and I know we're getting close to the end, but the work that people do now aren't just for themselves now in mobility. It's for themselves when they're 70, when they're 80, they're going to benefit from the work that they do now. So talk a little bit about doing work now that you may not see the direct results, but you will in 20 years.
Yeah. Wow. So that's a big topic for sure. And that is also something that I really love. Like genuinely, it feels good, and it inspires me to try to continue to attain that perspective, that mentality, because that is it's instant gratification, and we are predisposed, and we're constantly fed things that push instant gratification. And the way we've kind of adapted over time is to seek things out that feel good in the moment, and we're constantly chasing that, like sugary foods, like high calorie foods in general, or television that doesn't provide us any value, or social media is probably the most obvious one. Those kinds of things, right? These are all things that don't necessarily push us much further, like scrolling on social media and just watching TikTok, that kind of stuff. It doesn't necessarily progress us or improve our lives or add value to our lives in the long term. In the moment, it certainly does. It feels good, and it helps us distract us from our pains and our discomforts and our stresses. But in the long term, how is that going to push us further? So this is definitely something I've been very curious about. And for me, the way I'm going about this is constantly trying to maintain a perspective of the long game. And that's something I tell myself frequently. Like when I don't want to do something that I know is important for the business, you're playing the long game, buddy. You're not here, like this isn't a sprint. You're here to make a difference over 10, 20 years as opposed to the next 2 weeks, right? So looking back at what I've done over the last year, it's been a year now. We've been working on this certification, and we have not published it yet. It has not been released to the public yet. And every single day, 5 days a week, I've been getting up at 4:30 in the morning and coming to my office and working on this certification course. And there's nothing that's telling me to do this. I could stay up late. I could just sleep in. What's another day or two? You know what I mean? What's another week just sleeping in, catching up on rest? But in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, this is important work. And what I'm building here is not only going to benefit me in the long run, it's going to benefit my team, and it's going to benefit thousands of other coaches that are then going to benefit thousands of other people under each one of them. So there's a huge vision behind it. And I think that that really does help me with the long game. It feels like it's much bigger than myself at this point. And it feels like something that if I don't get it out there, then I'm doing a disservice to myself and those around me that I care about, and to those people that I haven't met yet that I will care about in the future. And that really does fuel my long game perspective. It's like, okay, doesn't matter how you feel. Yes, you slept 3 hours last night. It would be a healthier alternative to try and sleep in. I'm not saying that that's the best approach, but this is my approach, and this is this is the way I choose to work. And those 2-3 hours in the morning from 4:30 to 7 a.m., I don't have any interruptions. Those are the most productive hours of the day that I could possibly be working on this course while still getting at least 6 hours of sleep. My kids aren't awake. My team is not yet awake. My clients, the ones in North America anyways, our members in North America are not yet awake. I'm not getting messages, and I can literally I have no distractions, no fires to put out. It's just now that's what I was saying, remove clutter, remove distractions, and you can be creative. Those are the moments between 4:30 and 7 a.m. when I can be most creative and really dive in and hit flow state. Otherwise, my phone's going off the walls, and it's hard for me to actually just tune in and hit that flow state and really start making some productive work. And I feel like if we could possibly maintain that perspective of this is a long game perspective, it's important to not just dive into what's comfortable in the moment, but really keep an eye and maintain the vision of what I want in the long term and what's most beneficial for what's important to me, right? So it's not just about me. Again, it comes down to the values. And for me, people is a value. I genuinely care about how people live their life and how comfortable other people are in their lives. And that's something that drives me. So it's a part of my values. And if you can be more clear on what your values are and who your identity is, or who your ideal identity is, who do you want to be? If you can keep that present in the top of mind, you can make decisions a lot easier, and it becomes a lot more simple to push aside the immediate comforts of staying in the warm, cozy bed or other similar things, right? So I think having a long game perspective and doing what's important for the long term rather than the immediate gratification is extremely important for anything when it comes to growth. Essentially, I think success, regardless of what it is, that's probably one of the most important components to it, is being able to push aside your immediate gratifications, your immediate wants, for what you ultimately want in the long run.
Sure. And while you were talking, what resonated with me is mobility and flexibility equals longevity, because it's one of those things that you can see as you get older. If you stop learning, if you're stuck in your ways, it goes back to what you said earlier, is you find that your joints are tight, you're stiff, you don't have the range of motion that you need, you're not comfortable, and you're not living to your full potential. So whether it's physical mobility and flexibility, or if it's just that internal mobility and flexibility, it's necessary, and they both require a little bit of pain and discomfort to get to that place where you're really in your flow state.
Yeah, man. And consistency is all part of the equation always, right? If you're not going to achieve anything by doing it, 2, 3, 4, a handful of times. It's something that, if it's truly meaningful and it's something that you care about, it's going to need to be something that's part of your habits or your daily disciplines, right?
Yep. Well, Matthew, thank you for taking time. I know that you're busy and you weren't even sure if you were going to be able to make it today because of your schedule. So I'm grateful and appreciative that you allow me the time to hear from you. And I always enjoy our conversations, and I'm sorry that there are so many years in between other than just comments.
Well, man, the feeling is definitely mutual. I appreciate you having me here and giving me a platform to just rant. I'm somebody who isn't shy to just continue talking and expressing my opinions and my point of view. So I appreciate the platform and your time as well, man. Thank you.
Yeah, where can people follow you?
Facebook, Instagram. You can follow me at matthew.j.phili. And then Instagram, you can check us out at Primal Mobility, primal.mobility.
Okay, awesome. And then how can I support you?
How can you support me? Just
Yeah.
keep having these amazing conversations with people. And I think that's probably the best way to do it, man.
Awesome. I'll do it. Well, I'm grateful for you, Matthew. I'm just so thankful for what you're doing for the world and for your family. And it's fun to watch.
Cheers, man. Thank you.
All right, man. Be good.
Take care.